Today we're going to review what is shape in a photograph and how using that common element of shape and how to transform it into an abstract work of art. So there really is very little in our world that doesn't have shape to it. Shape is everywhere. It is often the first thing you see when you look at a scene, whether you are consciously aware of it or not. In art, especially photography, shape is one of the classic design elements, which also includes line, form, texture, color, and space. Almost every photograph contains one or more shapes, but great photographs are those where the photographer has used shape in a unique or interesting way. So the trick is in learning to find objects with appealing shapes and to capture them in an equally appealing way. Like the other classic design elements, skillful use of shape can give your photograph meaning and interest. So as seen in these two images here, instead of photographing a garden hose, as seen in this top image here, instead of photographing it as is, get down close to the garden hose, maybe do an aerial view, a bird's eye view shooting downward, and photographing it, maybe rule of thirds in a way that's not typical. The same with the image over on the right. Maybe it's actually getting down and creating a design or pattern with found objects instead of just photographing them as is, turning them into this more so work of art. So now let's talk about organic shape versus geometric shape. Organic shapes occur frequently in nature. They include curves such as those you might see in the petal of a flower, and irregular shapes such as those that you might see within the surface of a rock or leaves from a tree. Geometric shapes, on the other hand, are straight and symmetrical. As you might have guessed, geometric shapes are found more often in the man-made world and include things like buildings, roads, and bridges. And so with shape, we need to know what to look for. And so we're going to talk about looking for shapes created by outlines as well as shapes that are created within negative space. So particularly in a busy city environment, isolating a subject's unique shape is an effective way to create an image with dramatic impact. There are numerous areas to locate shapes. And there's, of course, the obvious, which is the shape of an object, but also consider digging deeper by looking for shapes that are created not only by outlines, but also by ones that are created by negative space. Silhouettes are also another way to highlight an object's shape by working with lighting effects. For instance, interposing the object between the camera and a light source to create a stark silhouette. And this example here, instead of photographing a city where we can see the windows, the doors, the trees that line against the skyline, people walking in the distance, by photographing this at sunset, we're using those lighting effects and using the light source there to create this dark black silhouette, which then in turn creates a shape. So what does a shape say? Shapes convey a lot of information to the viewer. Like line, different types of shapes convey different messages. So in these examples, circles, squares, and triangles with even sides can convey a sense of order and stability. Whereas these next images are curved or organic shapes can suggest relaxation and motion. So using shape effectively, if your subject is more interesting because of its shape, you need to focus more on angle, perspective, and the placement of other objects in the scene. If your subject is more interesting because of its form, you'll be more concerned with light and shadow and how you can best emphasize the two-dimensional shape of the object. A more creative way to represent shape, and the last area I'm going to touch base with, is pattern. One of the simplest ways to produce a striking image is by filling the entire frame with a strong pattern by repeating its shapes. So let's move from shape photography and go into more creating abstract photography. So keep in mind that if you are photographing a composition solely for the sake of capturing its shape, it should be your focal point. With that said, a lot of shape photography is design-based, and other background areas should be eliminated. Think of this as abstract photography. We don't want the viewer to concentrate on the specific object as an object per se, but as an expression of shape, line, textures, and color. And so by eliminating the background or cropping in closer, And practicing with these unique textures, we are able to create the design necessary for a successful shape or abstract photograph. So a couple of abstract photographers that use shape within their photographic images. The first one I have here is Jutta Barth. She is a female photographer from Los Angeles in California. And notice that she takes your typical object of a curtain that is covering a window and using the folds that we see here to represent line and shape, and also the shape that, this organic shape that is created by the light coming in through the window. And by photographing them closer, cropping in tighter, we're able to transform an ordinary object, a window curtain, into an abstract work of art. Another example here, notice how she took the light, kind of creating this shadow off of the window pane onto the wall. And once again, turning your average ordinary wall and this shadow created from the light and cropping in closer to create more design-based. Another example of her work. Another example is Andy Goldsworthy. He is a British sculptor, photographer, and environmentalist, and he creates his own sculptural images by using earth and creates these different patterns and designs, as well as color, and then photographs them to give off, once again, this abstract photography, this abstract work of art. Wolfgang Tillmans is our next artist that we're going to talk about, and he is a German artist who researches his surroundings for out of the ordinary shapes and designs. So as seen here, this is just your typical window washer from a car, just kind of spraying on the windshield fluid and capturing the depth of field there, how the background is blurred to create kind of this green monochromatic tone in the background. And then the splashes from the water creates an interesting design effect. Simple fold of paper, okay, creating this organic, kind of very peaceful, free-flowing curve. And in addition to that, there's a variety of different abstract shape photographers as well. And these are ones that just stand out to me the most. And so to get a kind of generalized idea of what type of work that we're looking for this particular lesson, here are some examples of photographers to look up and research.